Dzień dobry, witam Państwa na międzynarodowej konferencji w Krakowie, konferencji Sapere, konferencji pracy z ciałem, która ma przepiękne rozwinięcie i brzmi ono tak: nic tak dobrze nie wpływa na ducha jak ciało. Nazywam się Agata Algierska i zaproszę Państwa w tej chwili na wywiad, który przeprowadzę z panią Marianną Benzten. Marianna poprowadzi w tym roku trening w Polsce, na którym przedstawi to, w jaki sposób pracuje. Trochę nam teraz podczas tego wywiadu opowie nam również o tym, co według niej jest ważnego w pracy terapeutycznej i co może nam pomóc, pomagać naszym klientom. Powie nam również o tym, co jest istotne dla niej w tej pracy najbardziej. Zapraszam. So, what is the therapeutic method you use in your work with your clients?
That depends on the client. So it depends on two things really. One is, where is the comfort zone of the client? What is the client comfortable doing? Where do they feel at home? So I have to take into account whether they feel more at home talking, staying away from emotions, whether they feel very comfortable emoting, whether they feel comfortable kind of working in terms of their own body sensations and body experiences, or whether they don't feel comfortable being in the room with another person at all. So those are very different comfort zones. And the other thing that I have to look at is what is the learning zone? So where are they capable of learning right now? You can't learn, the reason you have to have both of those is you can't learn too far away from your comfort zone. You can only learn at the edge of your comfort zone. So somehow I have to find a bridge. For instance, if we're working with trauma, so we're working with a person who has, say, war trauma or childhood trauma, it doesn't really matter, but they have resources and they have trauma. And some of them may usually first need to know, they need some cognitive information about what is this and what's helpful with it. And in that case, I'll often start with psychoeducation, which is really, a cognitive behavioral method, but we use it in all kinds of different therapies. And then I probably will do a little bit of somatic experiencing to teach them the difference between moving between high arousal, low arousal, comfort and discomfort. So then I would be using somatic experiencing and some cognitive methods that are also used in somatic experiencing. In other cases, I would be, for instance, if I'm working with somebody who has high coping skills, I'm thinking of a client I had many years ago, high coping skills, also a very strong meditator, actually a monk, and at the same time he had disrobed, so he stopped being a monk because he realized that his emotional level was too, in his terms, shut down to be able to get any farther with his emotional, with this progression into compassion, working with compassion. So you have a very different problem. His understanding from traditional psychology is that he needed to break down his defenses. My perspective, also from hearing his life history, but largely from being with him, was this is not defenses. This is that you've never learned emotional interaction. So we have to find moments of meeting and learning emotional interaction from the bottom up. And learning that when you're a grown-up is not a simple thing. So how do you find those spaces where you feel safe together, where you feel that something meaningful, exciting is happening between you, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for that experience of meeting each other. And that would be, in a certain sense, it's building off Daniel Stern's work. And I don't know any psychotherapy forms that go hunting primarily for moments of meeting. So that's, I guess, a take straight out of developmental psychology, interpersonal neurobiology. So in other situations I might be doing a lot of symbolic play, working with symbols.
How are you doing this, working with symbols?
Well, Let me give you an example. I'm going to take two things here from the ground. We have one piece of bark and we have one piece of one leaf, and I could choose these as a symbol of something that I really like and something that I don't like. So if I describe what I like, I could say, okay, so this is it's green and it's actually heart-shaped if you look at it in the right way. So it reminds me of joy and kind of a light-hearted feeling. And this one is it's old and it's kind of been shed. So it reminds me of things that I lose as I grow older. So here I have a positive and a negative, and obviously I can use these symbols to access internal states. And that means that I can take this symbol with me to remind me of it. So there's this whole concept of the transition between the therapy room and home, the transitional object that you can work with in this way. And you can work with it both ways. I just picked these up because they were different and then found correspondences from the inside. But I've often worked with it, you work with it a lot in sand tray therapy and play therapy sometimes too, that you have inner states and you can symbolize them. You can find symbols for your mother or your partner when they're in a good mood, when they're in a bad mood, your own internal states. So you use symbols to work back and forth. Some people really benefit from that, and for others it makes absolutely no sense. So that's kind of you can work at the somatic level only, you can work at a somatic emotional level with moments of meeting, you can work with symbols, and you can work with cognitive insights and understanding and psychoeducation, and you can work with control and planning and decision making. And all of those are important, and I use, as I said, different psychotherapeutic modalities to get that. And it really depends on where the client needs to work. Yeah. The one common denominator is what I said about moments of meeting, the feeling that we're together in this. That's what's special about the therapy room, is not that I can teach you to do something by yourself, it's that we're together. Yeah.
I totally agree with this, and it's something what builds up the quality of the process, of the therapeutic process, and build up the possibility to make the next step.
Yes.
Also for the patients. Yeah.
Yes.
This is so beautiful.
Yeah.
What you are saying right now is, I guess it may be also corresponding with the workshop you are doing soon in Poland. Mm-hmm. Could you elaborate on this?
Yes. The workshop is actually a kind of standalone for a three-segment training. So the workshop itself will teach people how to recognize the basic skills of somatic grounding, really, somatic embodiment, and moving from there to the whole realm of emotional connection and attachment dynamics, and moving from there into cognitive self-control and also into levels of insight, levels of mentalization, understanding oneself, understanding other people, and discovering what's helpful at which time, just to be able to move between those three levels and even to see those three levels. And to experience them in yourself. So that's the first workshop, and in the next two workshops, if anybody wants to do them, then we'll go into the developmental experiences, because that lead to, not because, but that lead to learning these things. And the reason for that is that the reason that I do it that way is that, in my experience, the interpersonal developmental psychology is this enormously rich field of how we naturally develop our personalities through interaction, because that's how personalities develop. And by going there and really noticing some of the little differences in skill, we actually learn a lot about how to do interventions. Neuroaffective developmental psychology is this huge field of possible interventions, because you can take any interactive skill, and we know from psychology a lot about interactive skills in those first 10 years, 20 years, that you can basically take out and turn into an intervention in your psychotherapy room.
Right.
Or in your teaching. Yeah.
So that will be the base of the training you will be doing.
Yeah.
I wonder how the training you will be doing in Poland could support the SE practitioners in their work.
Yeah, I think that the main way it supports somatic experiencing is that it really allows, it puts the framework of autonomic regulation trauma states into the framework of development, so that you actually have an up-to-date modern understanding of interaction, instead of having a kind of the autonomic nervous system, and then if that's not it, what is it, kind of thing. And it has to do with this understanding that it's not just about somatic experiencing, it's about all therapies that I know of, that I've seen, are fantastic for some things, and they're not fantastic for everything.
Exactly.
So the trick is to know what is it fantastic for, and when are we outside the boundaries of what somatic experiencing can really do. And that's why I love that Peter himself, who's a dear old friend of mine and a close colleague, he actually said this method was developed for work with trauma. And it works best with those. You can adapt it to other things if you're skilled enough. But the basic modality as it is taught is meant to work with traumatized individuals and children that, adults and children that do have resources, that have a good enough attachment.
So if somebody doesn't have resources and enough level of attachment, you have first to really create it in order.
You actually have to work on both, because the trauma will block the attachment,
right.
and the lack of attachment will block the trauma processing. So that's why somatic experiencing, if you have, say, generational trauma because of war, which I think is a big issue in Poland, then you will have both. Generational trauma always hits attachment dynamics, and you also have trauma dynamics, just secondary trauma. So you have both. And you have to be able to work with somatic experiencing to resolve it, but it can't stand alone. So how do you put it together? And that's actually, I find, really the case with everything, every kind of issue that we work with, that one system cannot stand alone, one method cannot stand alone. I usually recommend that people have 3 different kinds of training. One that's basically somatic, one that's basically cognitive or systemic, and one that's basically somewhere in between, something fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is my next question, because I really found this idea of playing, which is lacking in our. You said about not only therapy but in our adult life.
Yeah.
We just lack it.
Yeah.
So I wonder, what could you tell about this?
About play.
Play in a therapy, how to import play into the everyday life to have better connections with others. And
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to start with something that I actually read yesterday. And it's from something called Aeon magazine, and there was this article from a researcher who had researched, does success make you happy, or does happiness give you success? And what the research shows, in this very long article, is that happiness comes before success. You get better at whatever you want to be better at if you're happier. So there are 2 essences to happiness, and one is better attachment, better close connections, and the other is playing with other people. Those are 2 of the best ways, fastest ways to have more happiness. And play as such is the core way that animals and human beings learn. So if you're trying to teach people and they're not having fun, you're likely to not be teaching very effectively. Now, fun has many levels. So there's the basic level of, like we were doing in the lecture, just clapping.
Yeah.
it's pretty simple, right?
Yeah,
But
and great.
people were having fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Or discovering different kinds of handshakes. People were having fun, right? But that's very simple. Then we can play actual emotional games of different kinds where we're chasing each other, for instance, and playing tag is called in English. And that's more complex. It's still very somatic, and you can go from there to symbolic play. For instance, I had these two things before. You could have two things too, and our two things could talk to each other. And then we're into symbolic play. Or we could let the two things talk to each other. You could have one, I could have the other, and we could have a conversation through them. Symbol play. And then there's intellectual play. In a way, a lecture, if it's done in contact with the people that you're lecturing, is a form of play. We're playing with ideas. We're playing with concepts. We're playing with our life experience, in a way. So play has many different levels. It doesn't all have to be, yeah? But this spark of curiosity, of exploring, of going deeper, of wondering what the other person is thinking or doing, of adjusting to that, that's all in play.
It's aliveness.
Aliveness, lots of aliveness, yeah.
What do the therapists overlook most often in their work with clients?
It depends on the psychotherapist.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but do you have a feeling like there is something? Yeah, you're right, because the very intellectual psychotherapy will overlook something different than the body psychotherapist will overlook it.
That's right.
But I wonder if you have from your work and your supervision experiences, do you have something what is coming very often?
Yeah. I think that the thing that gets overlooked all the time is, most of the time, is really the power of being together. I find that psychotherapists, when they're in trouble, they are wondering, what intervention should I do now? And then when nothing happens, they're like, what's the next intervention I should do? This isn't working. And as soon as they get into that state, they've lost that we're still here together. And they've lost that if I'm alone, then the other person is going to be alone too. And that in some ways, the strongest thing we have going is that we're both here. And we can see to what degree and in what way it's possible. And safe or pleasurable or alive to be together, and you can in a way always explore that.
I felt very touched by this, what you said already. It's like something what is so basic and like Mother Earth, always there, but we forget and we don't care.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
My last question will be what advice can you give to young therapists? I mean, what you said before is like a very huge advice to be aware of this, what our being with our clients means. But I wonder if there are some more advices you can give to young therapists.
One is stay curious. Yeah. No matter what's happening, keep getting back to your curiosity. Another is remember you're not following the client, you're guiding the client. Because a lot of psychotherapy, psychodynamically oriented psychotherapy says we're following the client because the client's body or the client's subconscious knows where it needs to go. That's actually not true. The client's subconscious has gotten them to where they are. So obviously they need something else. Yeah.
Right.
So, so what you're listening for is what helps the client to a better space. Yeah? And only the client's state will tell you that, but the client won't always notice that it just happened. The client doesn't always notice, wait a minute, there's something that worked. They're so used to focusing on what didn't work. So your job is to be curious about what worked, even if it's just a tiny thing, even if it was just a second. It's that second that can turn into 10 seconds. So that's 2 pieces of advice. And the third one, I think, is never be satisfied with just one method. So train one method, take some years to see what it can and cannot do, and then see what would complement it. Not what would be right next to it, but what would complement it well. And then do that again after another 5 or 6 years. Yeah. Some of us keep going with that.
Yeah, exactly. This is so. Yeah, this is. It will be my next, and maybe the last question. But I wonder what brought you to this point where you are here in your work. I mean, what method you learned? What did you find really resourceful? What did you like the most? What impact did people you met on your path to your work?
Well, I started out with relaxation therapy, psychomotor therapy. And what I think I most took from that was actually psychomotor development, which is, I think, really interesting for a lot of the early skills. And again, an incredible toolbox for what you can bring into your psychotherapy. And I was one of the founders of Bodynamic Institute and worked with that for developing that and as a trainer in that for the next 12 years. And then left it and started working with my colleague Susan Hart, who's a psychologist and a PhD now, and developing this neuroaffective dynamic. Partly because the research in it, there's so much research in the brain that if you want to know more about interpersonal behavior, and then that's where interpersonal and brain research is where things are. So it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. And from that basis, I've learned, or at least tasted, mentalization-based therapy, theraplay. Somatic experiencing was actually my first step out of Bodynamics. So when I met Peter in 1987, we started working together in 1989. So we've kind of tracked each other for a long time now. And then later came mentalization-based and theraplay, which I've just tasted. And the last 12 years I've been working with learning system-centered training, which looks at, for instance, what's happening in the group in a much more coherent way than I used to be able to do. And I've also been meditating for the last almost 30 years now. So I do a lot of meditation and I mix mindfulness practices in with this. So that's kind of I think that's most of it.
Did you find already something in the future what you would like to learn?
That I would like to learn? Oh my God, tons of things. Tons of things.
Just a question of time, perhaps.
Oh, yeah. I want to spend more time with art therapy. Yeah. That's one. And I think right now what my focus is not learning so much a new therapeutic, voice and music therapy. A fantastic resource. I'd love to know more about that. And also I have a strong focus these years on developing a way of analyzing clients, or myself for that matter, to see what is the proximal zone of development. What is it where is the person ready to learn, to change, to develop, and to relate different kinds of interventions to that, so that I'm focusing more on what are the interactions we're using rather than what is the method that we're interacting with. Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to talk with you. It was a big pleasure also to listen to your lecture and to take part on this, because it's really fascinating the way you are showing this also.
So what were you noticing in the way I was showing it, or what caught your attention about that?
First was the smoothness and easiness, but not only in talking about the way, but also in your posture and the way of your being, which was very relaxed and giving the this softness and roundness in it. This is what I was feeling in the group also, and I connect this with your person, and the way it was very. It was not too much and not too little. It was a perfect amount, in my opinion. And it was also, like Einstein said, it's so important to make things easy to people to understand. So I had a feeling like it was really put it in this way, because I know it can be, we can talk many big words about this, but it can be also said in a very easy way. And clear, so that was very nice. And this, like, lecture and experience. That was really, that was also great.
Yeah, so people don't go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
So,
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.